I'm damn sure you must not be expecting the magnitude of the tariff imposition that Mr. Trump has gone on Wednesday. How do you see it? What are your initial thoughts after looking at what kind of tariffs he has imposed across the world?
I think it's quite bewildering, Rajat, because the scale and the scope of what he has imposed on the world and all corners of the world, in fact, is quite mind-boggling. He is trying to liberate because I think ultimately the costs of many of these decisions will also be borne by American consumers.
One factor, considering our neighbors like Vietnam, Cambodia, and all these countries, the tariffs imposed are much higher than what have been imposed on us. Do you feel that India is trying to gain from this because we are better off when we compare ourselves with our neighbors?
See, I think we are certainly in a stronger position. I do think that that's a great there is a degree of possibility there which will hurt. I mean, these tariffs will hurt America. America is one of the most globalized economies of the world.
We want to understand, and that is quite shocking because small countries and poor and war-torn countries like Yemen, Sudan, they have also been imposed tariffs of 10%. How do you see that, and what is the rationale that you feel that explains this imposition of a tariff on these war-torn and small and poor countries? How do you see the altered geopolitical space now? Because we know that this is the beginning of a geopolitical evolution. So how do you see the geopolitical changes going forward?
See, geopolitically, we are in an unprecedented time because since the Second World War, we have never had an American administration that was willing to upend the order, both political order, security order, as well as the economic order that America itself had created.
As the last question, what is the future of WTO and what is the future of this multilateral organization which US created themselves and now they are on the verge of downfall? How do you see the future of World Trade Organization?
See, I don't think there is much of a future left, especially if you do not see a concerted attempt by other players in the WTO to come together and demand that it does something about what is happening in the world today.
Hello and welcome. You are watching Republic TV and Republic Business. US President Donald Trump on a Liberation Day has announced sweeping tariff on more than 180 countries and territories and slapping 26% on India and saying that India is charging 52% as far as US imports in India are concerned. What will be the ramifications of it and how this will impact the global economy and geopolitics? To decode all these aspects, we are joined in by Mr. Pant, who is Vice President Foreign Policy at Observer Research Foundation and a Professor of International Relations at King's College, London. Thank you, Mr. Pant, for joining us and sparing time out once again.
Thank you, Rajat. Thank you.
So, sir, I'm damn sure you must not be expecting the magnitude of the tariff imposition that Mr. Trump has gone on Wednesday. How do you see it? What are your initial thoughts after looking at what kind of tariffs he has imposed across the world?
I think it's quite bewildering, Rajat, because the scale and the scope of what he has imposed on the world and all corners of the world, in fact, is quite mind-boggling. Because the hope often is that economic logic should prevail in such decisions, and that you would not be you would not be looking at countries from China, India, Vietnam to Cambodia, Sudan, and Yemen, all in the same breath. But I think that's what he has done. With the chart at his disposal, he was trying to make a case that, look, this is a liberation day for Americans, etc., etc. I don't know who is trying to liberate, because I think ultimately the costs of many of these decisions will also be borne by American consumers. But at this point, certainly it seems more like a political gamble for him, that he's trying to assuage or allay the concerns of his base and perhaps give them something to relate to the presidency of Donald Trump, saying that, look, I promised you this, I'm protecting you from certain countries who are encroaching on us and who are taking undue advantage of us, and that had been a refrain throughout his presidential career, even in the past. But I think this time he wants to make a big deal of it. He wants to go all out, and he's perhaps also shaping the the negotiating landscape that will come next, because every country will now be bilaterally dealing with Mr. Trump and with Trump administration. So perhaps the idea was that, look, if I go all full on at this point, perhaps I will have things to negotiate with each of these countries, and I can get better deals for America. But that remains to be seen, because now we will end up into this phase of countervailing tariffs, and we have seen, for example, how China has strongly responded to what has happened. So I think we are in a very I think volatile phase of global economy, where an economic order that was already facing a lot of negative headwinds is now will now be facing the tariff landscape. But one thing has happened, which is, I think, somewhat of a positive, is that finally we know that this is what finally we know the extent of his tariff landscape, that this is what he wanted to do, because for a long time it was like a Damocles sword hanging over the world. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. That now that he has done it, I think all the countries will have to position their foreign policy, economic policy, and work around it. So I think that certainty has now come with it. Although with Mr. Trump, you can never be certain, I think.
Right. And also one factor, considering your neighbors like Vietnam, Cambodia, and all these countries, the tariffs imposed are much higher than what have been imposed on us. Do you feel that India is tend to gain from this because we are better off when we compare ourselves with our neighbors?
See, I think we are certainly in a stronger position, because you have to look at these tariffs in a comparative manner. These are not, you cannot just look at the numbers. You have to look at, what the other countries are facing, and also what is your exposure to the global economy. So I think India's economic growth story largely has been domestic driven. Our exposure to the global economy is relatively limited, which means that at the end of the day, we will not be impacted as severely by these tariffs as perhaps many other countries whose exposure to global economy and American market is significantly higher. And therefore, I think if you compare, of course, there is China, but also there are those countries like you mentioned, Vietnam and Cambodia, which used to be part of this China plus one strategy that the world was talking about for a very, very long time. And India was also part of that mix. And I think of all the countries, India relatively looks much more balanced at this point. India's situation looks much more balanced. And India certainly can take much greater advantage if at all we play our cards well, of the kind of changes that are big, that will come automatically with this announcement. So I do think that there is a measure of opportunity here as well, and we also know that India had been lowering tariffs over the last few months. We have seen that happen. So there are two things. One is, of course, that if this pushes India to become a more dynamic economy, if this pushes India to become a low tariff economy, then I think this is good news for many of those who had been demanding India do much more on the tariff front. But also tangentially, if you look at what others are facing and what India is facing, then I think we look much more resilient, and we look much more capable of I think protecting against the turmoil that is going to ensue and that is already ensuing in the global economy.
Right. And so also one thing that we are seeing, that the phase of countervailing tariffs and also a trade war seems to begin, because a lot of countries, even Canada has threatened that they will come up with retaliatory tariffs. China had already threatened that. Do you see that this flaring up going forward, the trade war, beginning of the trade war and flaring up going forward?
See, I think some of that will happen, because some of that, of course, is also for domestic consumption. That, look, we are also doing it because you have done it. So many countries will retaliate, like India had retaliated in the past. In Trump for 1.0, when there were certain tariffs levied against us, we automatically levied some tariffs against America. So some of that comes automatically. So you might see some countries coming out of it and coming after this announcement and levying their own tariffs. But I think what is more likely to happen, perhaps despite the rhetoric, is that countries would now start thinking what to do with the Trump administration now that he has played his cards, now that everything is out on the table. What is it that they can negotiate with? And I think that's also partly the aim of these tariffs, that when you announce such sweeping tariffs, the aim of the Trump administration is that now countries would seek a more balanced relationship with the US, and therefore would be opening some of their sectors for American products. Now, that I think eventually all countries would also take into cognizance, that ultimately the aim is not to enter into a mutual assured destruction mandate, that you destroy me, I destroy your economy, but ultimately to come out of it somewhat saved and somewhat less bruised than you would. So I do think that now you would enter into that process of gradual negotiations. And India, for example, if you think of India, India had already said that we are negotiating the bilateral trade agreement with the US. So I think our focus will be on what kind of a good deal we can get out of that BTA, which the first phase of which has to be concluded by the end of this year. So I do think that almost all the countries would be doing that. You can see a situation where China would levy some tariffs automatically. But again, it would be more the opening salvo. It would be more about, now let's come to the negotiating table and talk as to where we are going. So what we are going to see is a splintering of the global economy, that we are not going to see any multilateral effort, because multilateralism is dead, WTO is not working. But what we will see is bilateral engagement with the US. And I think that's perhaps that's where Mr. Trump at the end of the day would say that I've succeeded, because I'm now negotiating better deals with almost every country that wants to. But that again is something that we'll have to wait and watch insofar as what some of the other countries are capable of delivering also on that front, which would satisfy Trump administration.
Right. And also, sir, we know that the kind of the level of the tariffs that he has imposed across the world on the Liberation Day are quite higher what history has seen in the past. In fact, 1930s tariff, which were introduced, plunged US into a Great Depression and also plunged into a recession. Do you feel what is the US economy's future going forward, and do you feel that there are possibility of US getting trapped in a stagflation or recession?
I do think that there is that's a great there is a degree of possibility there, which will hurt. I mean, these tariffs will hurt America. It will. I mean, America is one of the most globalized economies of the world. So you cannot have a posture that basically says, I'm not going to trade with you, or I'm going to raise my tariffs without thinking of the consequences that would ensue on the people. We have already seen inflation rising in the US. We are seeing, for example, auto sales plunging in the US because of the gradual tariffs that have come into place. So I do think that there are significant consequences for American consumers, for American producers, and I think a lot of them have complained in the past about the policy. So we will have to wait and watch about the economic consequences of the sweeping tariffs. But perhaps the thinking behind this is, for Mr. Trump, is that, look, I will raise the pitch and then I will see where the ball falls. Then I will wait and watch and see how other countries catch the ball I'm throwing. So ultimately, for Trump, this becomes this is part of a long drawn out process through which better deals can be struck. Now, whether other countries play ball with this, whether the economy of the US remains resilient enough to sustain the pressures that are coming its way, that remains to be seen. But certainly, America cannot remain unscathed. American economy will be impacted, and I think it will have a political impact as well. So, and there, I think Mr. Trump will have to calculate and see, when he will see the impact on his politics. It's then that he will start reassessing some of these models. For example, he was very quick to assess when he imposed the initial tariffs on Canada and Mexico, and he realized that a lot of this is impacting American consumers. He waved them off for a while. So I think this is something that he does repeatedly, and we may see this also now that he is starting a broader negotiation with the wider world.
Also, one thing that we want to understand, and that is quite shocking, because small countries and poor and war-torn countries like Yemen, Sudan, they have also been imposed tariffs of 10%. How do you see that, and what is the rationale that you feel that that explains this imposition of a tariff on these war-torn and small and poor countries?
See, I don't think there is any economic logic, or I think the whole logic is that that he should have um, he can convey to his base that I have taken on the entire world. And I think the sense that, look, I have a long list of countries that I have targeted, because if you only do it for 4 or 5 big economies, then the impact is much less. But when you show it on a chart that, look, so many countries I've targeted, it's a huge list of more than 100 countries. I'm going all out. This is a war. This is a liberation for the Americans. You are making a political point. You're not making an economic point. You are not appealing to the economic logic of your populace. You're appealing to the political logic of something, of your campaign, of your promise, and the sense that, look, this has always been an unfair bargain, unfair economic bargain. Americans have been cheated. Americans have been looted. This is the language he has used, and therefore I'm now going to take every inch of that loot back. Now, in reality, how much of that happens, I don't think many people would care, because a lot of them, especially his base, is likely to just see and rejoice the fact that, look, we now finally have a president who is willing to take on the entire world for us. So I think it's more of political messaging, because what gains is America going to get out of targeting Yemen and Sudan and other countries who are actually on the margins of the global economy, who are actually not really impacting American economy the way, when he was his initial thoughts on tariffs, on the unfair balancing, when he was talking of China, European Union, Canada, Mexico, they made sense because they're close partners of the US. There is an economic logic to that argument. But when you say that, look, the entire world is arrayed against us, and that's a language he has used in the past as well. When he was campaigning, he used to say that, look, the entire world is against us. They don't want us to succeed. I am only with you. I'm standing with you. So I think that message is more of a protectionist, nationalist message that he is pitching to his audience. Some of that will be bought in the short term, because that is something that he had promised and he's delivering. But the long-term consequences will be determined by what happens on the ground to the American economy, and to the employment and the inflation that ensues with it.
Right. And so last two questions. One, now, since he has already announced the tariffs and now we know what he is up to, how do you see the altered geopolitical space now? Because we know that this is the beginning of a geopolitical evolution. So how do you see the geopolitical changes going forward?
See, geopolitically, we are in an unprecedented time, because since the Second World War, we have never had an American administration that was willing to upend the order, both political order, security order, as well as the economic order that America itself had created. So it's a situation where the order that Americans had created since the Second World War is being upended by Americans themselves. And that therefore it begs the question as to what is the alternative? Who is going to fill the void? And I don't think we see any leadership at this point. Neither the countries are banding together, key countries speaking in one voice, nor within America there is an alternative pushback against Trump administration, at least in the short to medium term. So I think we are in for a turbulent phase, because geopolitically we are not prepared for this kind. We were not prepared for this kind of an outcome, and unfortunately, when we are looking at it both from a security perspective and from an economic perspective, what America and Trump administration is trying to do at the moment is to dismantle it, disrupt it, but not offer anything concrete in its place. And that's a very dangerous position to be in, because that means that there is a void, there is a vacuum, and in politics, vacuums are always filled, whether by benevolent actors or by malevolent actors, and it's more likely that you are going to see much negative coming out of this disruption than anything positive.
And that's the last question. What is the future of WTO, and what is the future of this multilateral organization which US created themselves, and now they are on the verge of downfall? How do you see the future of World Trade Organization?
See, I don't think there is much of a future left, especially if you do not see a concerted attempt by other players in the WTO to come together and demand that it does something about what is happening in the world today. But it's very unlikely, because WTO and America's aversion to WTO had begun predates Mr. Trump. It is not, even under Biden, for example, WTO was marginalized by America. And I think in response, other countries also decided to neglect it rather than build it or rebuild it. And I think what most countries today are interested in, or seemingly are interested in, is rather than investing in multilateralism that may or may not succeed, you enter into bilateral agreements with the US. So I think bilateralism with the US or with other actors is seen as the preferred mode. You also see that in the context of India, for example, where India is signing FTAs with a number of countries, or negotiating FTAs with a number of countries. And because the institutional fabric of WTO and broader multilateralism is fraying, and it is not working according to the aspirations of the founders, of the founding members. So it's clearly a big shift in our global economic governance, where we have such a big void that both in terms of leadership by critical countries, as well as in terms of the institutional frameworks that at one point seemed suited to the times that we lived in, but no longer are responsive to today's needs.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Pant. It's always a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for sparing time out and talking about the tariffs and making us understand. Thank you so much once again.
Thanks, Rajat. Bye-bye.